Just to repeat myself one final time, my name is Jennifer Federoff. I'm the president of USA, and I'm going to be conducting the U.S. Undergraduate Admissions Standardized Testing webinar. I'd also like to introduce Nancy Kogan. She's my colleague who is also on the line. You'll probably hear her collecting your questions and letting me know what issues people are most concerned about. Thank you very much for spending your Sunday evening doing this. It might not be everyone's favorite thing to do on a Sunday evening, but I know if you're interested in U.S. university admissions, it's a long and complicated process and not always an easy one, and getting as much information as you can is always very helpful. So I hope that you'll find this a very informative webinar. And again, Nancy and I both speak Russian, so feel free to put your questions to us in Russian if you have difficulty formulating them in English. What we're going to cover in this webinar are the most common standardized tests that are used for university admissions. I know that with the introduction of EGA in Russia, standardized tests are becoming more important for Russian university admissions, but they're probably still not nearly as important as they are in the United States. The SAT is the fundamental university admissions exam. And there's also an SAT too. Most of you are probably familiar with the TOEFL. And then there are also IB and AP exams that play an important role in university admissions. And so for all of these exams, today we're going to talk about the logistics of how you take the exam. We're going to talk about how U.S. universities are using these tests. What are they looking for? Why do they have us take them? And then how do we improve our scores? Because that's really what I think most people are interested in. We're going to discuss all of those tests, the SAT, the TOEFL, and the AP exams. And after the discussion of each exam, we'll pause for questions and answer any kind of specific questions about that exam. As we've said before, feel free to submit your questions through the question box, and I'll try and answer as many of them as possible. It doesn't look like right now I have any questions about how we're going to proceed, so if there are no questions, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is a little bit about me. I know I met several of you while I was in Moscow and St. Petersburg in September, but for those of you who have never met me face-to-face, there's my smiley little face. My name's Jennifer Federoff, and I'm the president of USA. And I did my undergraduate work at Harvard, and I have an MPA from Princeton. I spent several years working on international exchange programs in Moscow, and I founded USA to help Russian students who are interested in enrolling in the United States, primarily to get their bachelor's degrees. Because the admissions process in the United States is very different from the admissions process in Russia, and I know that it can be difficult to understand how to get in. So we work with students, some who have already graduated from high school, but we can start as soon as 9th or 10th grade in Russia to help people put together the best package, because we're in the heart of the admission season right now in the United States. The early admissions deadlines have just passed, and most universities have deadlines January 1st or February 1st. So this is the time when American students are putting together application packages, and the SAT and standardized exams are a very important part of enrolling in the U.S. university. It's not the only part, of course. I think the most important thing for admissions that admissions offices are looking for are your grades, but those grades are grades that you get in your courses over 2 or 3, 4 years. That's the single most important thing, and then standardized tests are probably the second most important factor that universities are looking at. And so, of course, it has to be an important component of your preparation if you would like to go to a U.S. university. Just a word about the different types of exams if you're not familiar with them. The SAT is considered a general admissions exam. It's, I know, often called the SAT in Russian. We usually call it the SAT in English. It's considered a test of general knowledge. So what the people who design the test would say is that this is not a test that you can prepare for by memorizing specific things. Instead, it's generally something that you prepare for in the course of your high school experience by taking difficult classes and developing yourself. If you think about it from a university perspective, they have students applying from Moscow, they have students applying from California, and they need some kind of way to compare. What does it mean that Marina got pятерки and Jennifer got straight A's? How can we compare these students? How do we know if the schools are as difficult, if the program of study are similar? So the SAT is a way for them to compare people who come from very different backgrounds. It gives them one number that they can look at and compare. A test that I'm sure many of you are familiar with is the TOEFL, which is basically an ESL exam, a test to see how well your English is. The SAT-2 exams are subject matter tests. So in contrast to the SAT, which is really an exam that tests general knowledge, the SAT-2 tests cover very specific things: English literature, world history, biology, mathematics, and there's a very set amount of material that's covered, and you can prepare to that specific material. And then finally, there are tests that you can take. Some of you may be at an international baccalaureate school where you can take IB exams. If you are in an Anglo-American school, you might have the opportunity to take AP tests, and we'll talk a little bit more about those, but basically those give you the ability to start college while you're in high school. If you're doing college level work in your high school, you can get credit for it. So those are the four main types of exams that we're going to talk about today. And just to let you know, hopefully I won't disappoint you, but these are the exams we will not talk about. I'm not going to talk about YGE. Sometimes people ask me if their results on YGE play any role in American admissions decisions, and they don't. American universities won't look at it. I would say one kind of nice thing if you're thinking about going to a U.S. school is that our admissions process is, you've usually submitted all your documents by January, and so you'll get your answer in April and you'll make your decision about where you're going in May. Well, if you're not happy with your results in April, you still have time to try and get into a Russian university that summer. Hopefully that doesn't happen to anyone, but YGE is not going to play any role in your U.S. admissions process. And the other exams I want to talk about, I think most of the people who we have attending today are in high school, but a lot of you have probably heard about the GRE, which is used for graduate school. And by graduate school, I mean aspirantura, or I can't pronounce it, for a master's degree, excuse me. The GMAT is used for business school. I know a lot of people are interested in business school. The LSAT is used for law school, and the MCAT is used for medical school. The U.S. education system is a little bit different than the Russian system, and we do our undergraduate work, or your time, for your bachelor's degree or первое высшее образование. We do that first, and then if you want to become a lawyer or a doctor or get a master's in business, you do that next. I'm not going to talk about those exams. Some of the strategies that you use to be a good test taker on the SAT are the same strategies you would use with these exams, but those exams are very specific to the fields that they're designed for. So I apologize if we have any aspiring business students, but we're not going to cover the GMAT today. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and get started talking about the SAT. Let's see here. Oops, had a little technical difficulty there. The structure of the SAT. The SAT is an exam that you take on the computer. It's a little bit less than 4 hours, and it has three main parts: reading, math, and writing. The writing component is relatively new. So sometimes when people talk about the SAT, if they're comparing their SAT scores, you won't even hear them talking about the writing score. It's sort of not considered as important as the reading and math scores, but writing is now increasingly important a part of the exam. So there are three basic parts to the exam. But now, you thought you could just sit there and listen. We're going to see we're going to jump right in and give you an example of what an SAT question looks like in case you've never seen one. This is a sample of a math question, and I'm going to launch a poll where you can give me your answer. And please don't fret. No one's going to know whether you got the answer right, except me. And hopefully I figured the answer out correctly for myself. So we're launching a poll right now, and I would appreciate it if you guys would put in your answer. This is just an example of a typical SAT math question. So if you've got paper handy, I'm sure it would help, but Otherwise, you can just take a guess. The question asks, if x plus 2x is 5 more than y plus 2y, then what does x minus y equal? And in true SAT fashion, we have a multiple choice question, which means they're going to give you the answers. So if you had a lot of time, you could plug every single answer in there and see which one worked. Your choices are A, -5, B, -5/3, C, 3/5, D, 5/3, or E, 5. So go ahead and put in your answers. I'm seeing some people already starting to answer. And we'll give you guys a minute to work on it. If you don't have paper, don't worry. I'm not going to see who answers what. So we'll probably take another 15 seconds with this and give you all a chance to hop in and say what you think. You're getting to take your first SAT question right now. All right, 10 more seconds, and then we're going to close the poll. So hurry up. The clock is always ticking during your SAT exam. Go ahead and give your answer. Okay, we got a few answers. These were the results, and when I did it, I got D as well, so we're going to say that that's the correct answer. I hope it was. Feel free to send me an email complaining if my math was wrong. But this is an example, and the most important thing that I just wanted to demonstrate with this is not whether you can do your algebra, but for most questions on the SAT, you're going to have choices. Actually, for all the questions, you're going to have choices of answers. And this is a very different from what you might be used to in your Russian schools, where you give oral exams. If you're more used to oral exams, you're probably not used to having the answers given to you, and you just need to figure them out. But this is how most SAT questions go, so you should be prepared for these multiple choice questions. So let's try it again, see if everyone's paying attention. Here is our next poll question, which says, this is a sample from the reading test. It says, let's see. Let me share it with you, excuse me. As the Supreme Court Justice. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to read this sentence and see what looks like it's wrong. We're looking for the error in the sentence, the error in the grammar or the structure. And bear in mind that there may be no error. Sometimes there is no error. That's sometimes the correct answer. As a Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall was known for his quest to end racial discrimination, his opposition to the death penalty, and he supported free speech and civil liberties. So, having heard that sentence, if someone asked you what is the mistake in English grammar in that sentence, what would you say? The poll's open now. Go ahead. I'd love to hear what your votes are. Do you think it was no error? Is it the word as? Is it was known for? Is it answer C, his opposition to, or D, he supported? We've got a couple people who are brave and hopped right in with their answers. Waiting on a few more people. Go ahead, make a guess, don't be shy. I know it's a little bit nerve-wracking to have to take these tests publicly, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. We're going to give it 15 more seconds, and then I'm going to close the poll. Okay, imagine you're in the SAT. You've got 5 seconds left, so go ahead and fill in your answer if you would. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, this was a hard one. Half of you thought it was B, and actually the correct answer is D, and I'm going to explain why. Thurgood Marshall was known for, and then following the verb we have nouns, quest, opposition, and then here should be the word support and his support for free speech and liberty. So I guess perhaps I read it out loud a little bit poorly, but you might be able to hear when you read it out loud a change in tone. Thurgood Marshall was known for his quest to end racial discrimination, his opposition to the death penalty, and his support for free speech and civil liberties. What they're looking for there is parallel structure in the English grammar. So that's a tough one. It's incredibly hard. I would hate to have to do that in Russian. I know I would embarrass myself. So I appreciate everybody being courageous and trying to answer the question. Again, that's just a sample of what a English reading question would look like on the SAT. When you take the SAT, even though there are only 3 parts, there's the reading part, the writing part, and the math part, you're actually going to take 10 exams. Most of them are about 20 to 25 minutes long. So altogether, you'll spend 60 minutes on writing, 70 minutes on reading, and 70 minutes on math. But they're broken up into pieces. For the most part, what you're going to see are multiple choice questions, similar to what we just did. In the writing part, you will have an essay, and also in the math, they have something called free response, where you need to grid in the answer. So, you know, your answer might be 5.3, and you actually will find a little oval and shade it in. You find the number 5, and then you find the decimal point in the 3, and you shade that in. But for the most part, you're just entering A, B, C, D, or E. And these are the components of the exam. I know a lot of what people are interested in is what the scoring looks like on the SAT, because everybody's concerned with what kind of score do they need to get into the school that they want to go to get into the university that they want to get into. All the components, all 3 of the exams are, you will receive a score that could be as low as 200 if you didn't answer anything, or as high as 800 if you answered everything perfectly. These are the possible scores, and each section goes from 200 to 800. The mean, or the average, for each section, this is the people who write the test, who design the test, design it so that the average score in any given year is supposed to be around 500. So you can see that's very true with reading. In math, it's a little higher, and generally you'll see that people tend to have, in general, math scores that are slightly higher than their reading scores. And then the writing score is also around 500. For those of you who are looking to get into very prestigious, highly selective institutions, this shows us what the mean scores were for students who were admitted. So these are not the scores for people who applied. These are scores for people who admitted. If you lined everybody up who got into Amherst, the person with the lowest scores and the person with the highest, what schools will do is publicize their 25th to 75th percentile. So kind of to give you a sense of what the people who were in the middle, what kind of scores do they get. So you can see for Amherst, the reading score, the 25th to 75th percentile goes from basically 700 to 800. Math, similarly, 680 to 780. Writing scores are very similar. The scores are almost identical for Harvard. You can see with MIT, which is a technical university, the reading scores are a little bit lower, but the math scores are very, very high. And what this should alert you to is that if you're thinking about going to a very selective school, I would orient you. You need to be in that 1500 range, meaning you need to have sort of 750s scores on your reading and math, because that kind of puts you in the middle of the pool. I mean, those are very high scores. They're really excellent scores, but there are a lot of people who can get perfect scores on the SAT and maybe still not be admitted. So if you're just talking about the combined score for reading and math, it's about 1500. For reading, math, and writing all together, we're talking probably about 2100. Excuse me. That said, not every school has such high scores. These are really great state schools. Ohio State, which has a lot of international students, SUNY Binghamton, which is sort of one of the leading New York State schools. You see that the reading scores in the case of Ohio State is just slightly above average. And I should say that the average score, this is the average score of everyone who takes the SAT, and there are many people who take the SAT who may never go to college. So there are you will rarely see that a school has mean scores below 500, because many people will take the SAT and then choose to join the Army or go to work, and they won't go to college. So some of those people who are scoring lower probably aren't enrolling in universities, which is why you'll see that the mean scores are typically higher than 500. And I would also like to just point out, in case I didn't say it before, you can usually find these numbers from university websites. So if you know that you would very much like to go to Rutgers in New Jersey or UCLA in California, go on their website and see what the mean scores were for the class that was admitted. There are also lots of handbooks about college enrollment where you can get all sorts of information. This is publicized information, and it can just help you orient yourself. If you're dreaming of Harvard, but you have 500 test scores across the board, you know that it's probably not realistic, because they're not admitting a lot of people with scores like that. So this is just a sample of what the mean scores look like for different types of schools. Now, CUNY Brooklyn, for example, you see scores below 500 or close to 500. It's a relatively open university. They take most applicants, so you can see that the SAT scores are not as high. I just want to cover a couple words about logistics. How do you take, now that you've all taken a poll and tried to answer a question, how do you take this exam for real? The SAT is, here's where you would go to register. It's a link. I'm sure if you Google, SAT exam registration, this would come up. It is possible when people ask, where should I take the exam? Because I do encounter people sometimes who come to the United States specifically to take the exam. And frankly, I personally don't think that that's necessary. I think it's best to take the exam in a place where you feel comfortable. So to me, that would be my hometown. Ideally a school that I'm comfortable with. There are testing locations in pretty much every major city in Russia, and in some cities there are several locations. I know in St. Petersburg, for example, the Anglo-American school, which is on the Petrogradskaya, I know that they offer the SAT at that location. In Moscow, in the place where I used to work on Leningradsky, we had a facility for offering SAT. So I don't see any reason to go to a foreign country to take the SAT. And I know some people come here and they take preparatory classes, and that's possible, but why not at least take it where you feel comfortable? The test is offered 6 times a year, and you need to give yourself a little extra time to register if you're taking it internationally. Internationally, to take the exam, it costs $81. And then the other really big question that people usually have is when should I take the SAT? And I will say that you should probably plan, if you're convinced you want to go to a U.S. university, you should take the SAT at least twice. So if you have time, if you're in 9th or 10th grade, I would say plan to take, and I'm speaking of people in a Russian system who are going to go to 11 grades. So if you're going to be applying to school while you're in your 11th grade, you're applying to American universities while you're in 11th grade, you should take the test in the fall of your 11th grade, but ideally you should have taken it in the spring of 10th grade too. If you can take it in the summer, again, if you take it in the spring of 10th grade, that gives us time to see what your scores are and figure out if they're good enough, and if they're not good enough, it gives us time to prepare and retake the exam. There's absolutely nothing wrong with retaking the exam. I would say that most American students take the exam 2 or 3 times, if not 4 or 5. At some point it becomes a little bit absurd, but you should definitely plan to take it twice if that's possible, potentially 3 times. And then another small point I'd just like to point out is they have a very good explanation on their website about what you can take to the exam, because you can actually take calculators into the exam, for example, to help with math, but only certain types of calculators. You can't take your calculator that's programmed with every formula that you're going to need, unfortunately. So if you are taking the SAT, be very careful to check out what you're allowed to take into the exam. Also, there are a lot of rules about identification, because they don't want people cheating on the exam, so you want to make sure you have the right kind of ID. I want to talk just briefly about testing strategies, and I know I'm spending a lot of time on the SAT, but as I said, it's probably the single most important exam that U.S. universities are going to look at, so I think it's important to talk about it. This is not an easy piece of advice, but it's probably the most important, and that's read, 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 read. Read novels, American novels, English novels, read newspapers, and really try to expand your vocabulary. Try and find words that you've never seen before and try and understand the roots of those words and what their meaning is. That's really the best way to get a good score. That's what the test designers would say about how they've designed the test, that it really, especially in terms of the reading comprehension section and the writing section, the best thing you can do to improve your scores is to read a lot. The second major point I would say is make sure you're very familiar with the format of the test. This is a standardized test, which means that the questions will be different, but the format is always the same. So you don't need to spend time when you take the exam reading the directions. When you get to a certain math section, you should know what the instructions say. When you get to the part where you have to grid in the math answers, you should know how to do that because you've practiced it. You want to feel as confident as possible going in that you know what the exam experience is going to be like. So again, if you go to the sat.collegeboard.org, they have a lot of free information about how to take the test. You can take practice tests, and the single best way to prepare for the exam is by taking practice tests. You can sign up for a question of the day, and they'll send you by email a question every day in math or in reading, so you can see what kind of questions will be on the exam, so you can understand what kind of instructions that you'll face. You can also buy books of practice exams. You can load them into your computer. So be very comfortable with what the exam is going to be like before you go in and take it. You've sort of taken the first step by joining this webinar today where we've gone over it in very basic terms, but if you're sure you want to take the exam, study for it. That's probably obvious advice, but still worth giving. My next point is take the exam at least twice. The people who write the test will say that just by taking the exam a second time, your score will go up about 40 points. People who provide test preparation services will say that they can improve your scores by several hundred points sometimes. Plan to take the test at least twice, because through doing the test, you get better at taking the test. And most universities look at your best scores. So it doesn't hurt you to have taken the test more than once. They usually don't compile an average. They just look at your best scores. And in some cases, they do what's called super scoring, where if you got, let's say you took the test once and you get a 700 in reading and you get a 600 in math, and you take it again and you get a 600 in reading and you get a 750 in math. When they decide what kind of grade, what kind of score you got on the exam, they might say that you got a 1450 because you got a 700 in math, a 700 in English on your first exam reading, and a 750 in math on the second exam. That's called super scoring, and sometimes universities will do that too because they want their numbers to look high, don't we all? And so plan to take the exam at least twice. As I said, in the spring of your 10th grade and then in the fall of your senior year. You can always take it earlier if you'd like, but at least give yourself enough time to do that. And also, after you've taken the exam, you'll get an online score report, and it will show you not just what your scores were in each section, but in specific parts of the math. You know, is your weakness geometry? Is it algebra? There's a lot of information in that online score report that can help you identify your weaknesses. And then I said this a little bit before, but be prepared for your test day. You want to go in very confident in knowing what's going to happen. Make sure you get a good night's sleep. Know where the exam, is going to take place. If you've never been to Leningradsky Prospect, make sure you know which subway line you're going to take. Maybe do a test run. Have your calculator, your ID all by the door so that you're ready to hop out the door and start that exam. Be sure to keep track of the time as you take the exam. Don't waste too much time on any one question. And then guess smartly. When they do the raw score, you get 1 point for a correct answer, but you only lose 1/4 of a point for a wrong answer. So statistically speaking, if you have A, B, C, D, and E, if you know there's one answer that's wrong, let's say you don't know what a word means, but you definitely know that it doesn't mean answer A, we can eliminate A. Statistically speaking, you can make a guess, and because you're only going to lose a quarter of a point if you're wrong, but you get a point if you're right, a whole point if you're right, it makes sense to just guess. Of course, you want to try and eliminate as many incorrect answers as you can. If you get down to it's either C or B, I'm not sure which, you definitely want to guess. If you can't eliminate any question, then you might need to admit it. But in general, if you can eliminate at least one of the wrong answers, go ahead and guess. In terms of math, I would say this is maybe not as big a concern for Russian students, but make sure you have formulas memorized. The Pythagorean theorem, how do you calculate the area and volume of circles, rectangles, squares, that sort of thing, cubes. You should just know that. As I said, you want to have that stuff down cold so you don't even have to think about those things. You want to focus on what the question's asking. You don't want to try and remember, okay, what is the Pythagorean theorem again? There are lots of rules about how to calculate the sides of triangles, the length of sides of special triangles. You should know that stuff by heart. When you're looking at the writing section or the reading section, you can try and read questions to yourself out loud very quietly. Don't look at the answer. Just sort of I know this is kind of hard advice if you're not a native speaker of English, but sometimes you can just hear the answer. Don't try and plug the answers in because you are given 5 answers, but just listen to the sentence. Where doesn't it sound smooth? Where doesn't it sound natural? And that is a good possibility for the wrong answer. And then in the reading comprehension section, just one other small tip. A lot of times they will refer to you'll read a passage and then there'll be a very specific question like, when the author uses the word enraged, how does this reflect her tone? Or what was she referring to? Go find that word. Go back to the passage, find the word, read 2 sentences before it and read 2 sentences after it, and you can usually find the exact answer that they're looking for. This is why I think Russians sometimes think that these standardized tests are very silly, because they think, well, you can just go find the answer. But it's a good piece of testing advice nonetheless. So we've spent about a half an hour on the SAT. I appreciate your attention while we did it and your willingness to participate in the polls. But before we move on to the TOEFL, I just wanted to see if there were any questions about the SAT. So I don't see anybody submitting questions while we were talking. If you have any questions on the SAT, I'm just going to pause here for 1 minute and give you a chance to submit them now if you have them. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the TOEFL. And there's going to be time at the end where we can answer questions about any of the exams. So if you have questions about any of the exams, we can do it at the end as well if you don't want to submit them now. But I'll be happy to answer questions on the SAT specifically right now if you have them. Okay, it looks like I'm not seeing any questions, so I hope that reflects on my abilities, that I was just crystal clear through the entire presentation. I'm not going to assume that, but I can always hope. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to the TOEFL, but as I said, if you have additional questions, we can discuss these later. And I will say that some of you may be more familiar with the TOEFL than I am, insofar as I have never taken it. So I am speaking somewhat theoretically here. But the structure of the TOEFL, as we said, the SAT has 3 main components. In the TOEFL, we're looking for reading, listening, speaking, and writing, the 4 main components of understanding a foreign language. And what I've been told by university admissions officers is most important for them, of course, they want to make sure that you have a good TOEFL score, because they want to be sure that you're prepared to enroll in a U.S. university and do U.S. university level work. It's very important to them that they see really strong writing scores and reading scores, because U.S. university students spend a lot of time reading on their own and doing a lot of writing. So they're very concerned with, they want to see a strong score overall on the TOEFL, of course, but they're in particular concerned that you have good reading and writing skills, because those are the skills that they think are most important for success at a U.S. university. The TOEFL, I think, is actually a little bit longer than the SAT, and these are the tasks that you're asked to do. You actually will speak. You'll listen to lectures. It's an attempt to simulate a university environment. But before we get too much into how the TOEFL works, here we go again, my dreaded polls. This is a real TOEFL question. If you saw the sentence, such impacts continue to pose a natural hazard to life on Earth. The word pose in this passage is closest in meaning to claim, B, model, C, assume, or D, present. So let's see what you all think. Don't be shy. Go ahead and vote. This is Veliki Mogući Angliski Jazyk, where a word like pose easily has 4 meanings. What do you guys think that it means in this sentence? Obviously, one strategy for approaching this question, we can plug the answers in. Such impacts continue to claim a natural hazard, to model a natural hazard, to assume a natural hazard, or to present a natural hazard. I'm going to give you guys 5 more seconds. So with every exam, you have to be very careful about managing your time, right? So I'm going to close this poll down in just a couple more seconds as everyone has the chance to answer. Once we've spent a minute on this, get your answers in. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So we had a lot of disagreement, as you can see from the results. Everybody checked every answer, and the correct answer is present, which, as you heard me speak, I said present and not present, which is another challenge of English. The impacts continue to present a hazard to life on Earth. Again, this is just for fun to show you what a sample TOEFL question looks like. All right, this is also a sample. As we said, the TOEFL, it's very important that you write a sample essay because they want to see how well you write. That's a really fundamental skill for being a student in the United States. So you would, in a real TOEFL exam, you would listen to a lecture through your headphones of a professor speaking on a topic. You would also read an article written by someone who typically has a different point of view. And as you listen to the lecture and also as you read the article, you could make notes. And then a very typical sample essay, a real sample essay, would be summarize the main points of the lecture and explain how they differ from the points in the reading passage. This is a really fundamental skill that you'd have to have for a U.S. university. So this is a very typical essay kind of question that you would see on the TOEFL. And as we discussed, each section of the TOEFL, the four sections are scored from 0 to 30. If you're taking the internet-based TOEFL, which is what most people would be taking if you're taking it in Russia, and that will give you a score from 0 to 120. Thank you for closing my poll, Nancy. I'm sorry if I had a little technical difficulty there. I hope you're all seeing my typical TOEFL scores now. I would like to say something about the TOEFL scores too and how the universities use them. If you get 120 on the TOEFL, doesn't mean you're going to get into Harvard. And I would say that a TOEFL is necessary but not sufficient. So you have to have the minimum TOEFL score necessary to go to the school that you want, but it's not enough to show the university that you're qualified for admissions, because you're a foreign student, you're an international student who's trying to come to their university, and you're competing with Americans who are native-born English speakers. So the TOEFL shows them that you're capable of doing the work at the university, but the other criteria for admission are really your grades and your SAT scores, and the TOEFL just shows that your English is good enough, but it doesn't really demonstrate your other academic skills. But having said that, again, these are the minimum scores that universities say that they have. Harvard doesn't publicize its minimum score, but you can project that it's probably about 100, given that that's what it is for other very elite universities. At a place like MIT, it's slightly lower because, again, it's a technical university. And then at state schools, it's slightly lower. CUNY Brooklyn, it serves New York City. It's an environment with a lot of immigrants, and so they're a little bit more willing to take a lower TOEFL score and let you improve while you're there. Having said that, these are the minimum scores. Some schools will not consider you if you don't have the minimum score, but that's not the average score of people that they admit. On the TOEFL last year, the average score for all people applying for undergraduate admission was 78. In Russia, it was 84. At Amherst, the average score was 109 of their admits. At MIT, it was 109. You can project that at Harvard, it's probably around 109, 110. At a school like SUNY Binghamton, it's in the 90s. So this, again, just helps you get a ballpark to know, am I there? Do I have the score that I need? With the TOEFL, you can actually take it several times. It's offered a lot more frequently than the SAT. So if you need to, you can take it again. I will say sometimes when you go to the schools to see what their scores are, you will see a score that's in, say, the 500 range. They might say our minimum score for admission is 550 and our average score was 600. That's the score on the paper-based test, which you will not take. You would probably take the internet-based test if you're in Russia. So this is a website where you can, where the company that designs the test will show you how to convert the scores. So if a university says we have a 550, you can see that that means you need a 79 for minimum admission standards. If you can either use this link, or if you Google TOEFL conversion table, you can get that table. You can register online. The TOEFL is more expensive than the SAT. It costs $250 to take, so that's the downside of having a strategy of taking and retaking the exam. It's expensive, but again, you can take it in Russia. I don't see any reason to travel to the United States unless you want to have a nice vacation. And you should take the TOEFL when it's convenient for you because it's offered so much more frequently than the SAT. I would set up a schedule of plans to take the SAT, figure out when that's convenient, and then work the TOEFL in at other times. The testing strategies for the TOEFL are much like the testing strategies for the SAT. Immerse yourself in English. You should be prepared to hear all kinds of different accents. You are listening to a very standard Midwestern Ohio accent right now, but there are Southern accents, there are New England accents, there are British accents. Listen to internet radio. There are all kinds of great podcasts you can listen to on topics of interest. Watch the movies. It hardly feels like studying, but I know it can be hard to understand different types of English, so be sure you're familiar with different sorts of accents. Have a plan for study. Set aside 2 or 3 months before the exam when you're going to practice. And just like with the SAT, if you buy a book of practice exams or a CD-ROM of practice exams, tell yourself every Saturday morning, I'm going to get up at 8 o'clock, I'm going to set my alarm, and just like I was going to the exam location, I'm going to get up, have my breakfast, I'm going to go sit in front of my computer, and I'm going to do a practice exam from start to finish with no interruptions. I'm going to spend 4 hours doing it. And that way you can get, in 2 months, you can get 8 practice exams under your belt. That's one of the simplest ways to get comfortable with any sort of standardized exam format. Manage your time. Be sure to skim passages quickly to kind of see what the main point is, and then read carefully. Also, take notes as you read so that you can refer back to them, and you can even you'll have a little bit of organization time before you actually get the material that you need to read or listen to, and go ahead and write on your note paper main idea, major points, supporting details, so that your paper is already set up, and then as you're listening, you can write, okay, the thesis of this passage, the main idea of this passage is that the primary cause of the U.S. Civil War was a fight for states' rights. The secondary cause was slavery. And you can just fill that in because you already have main idea, major points written on your paper. Also, practice speaking on familiar topics. Talk to yourself or talk to your classmates, your parents, anyone you can find who would listen about why would you like to go to a U.S. university? What do you hope to study in university? What was the most interesting project you ever did in high school? have 2 or 3 minute presentations sort of in your mind already rehearsed that you can work into anything that you're asked to speak on. Whenever you're writing or whenever you're speaking, make sure you have 3 main points: an introduction, the 3 points that you want to make, and a conclusion. This is sort of in English what we say: tell them what you're going to say, tell them what you told them. It's okay to repeat yourself. Make sure that your points are clear, because these exams have to be scored very rapidly, and you don't want someone to miss what your point was because you were so concerned with your beautiful language. The main thing is to have a clear structure to any presentation you make or any writing that you do. And on the TOEFL, there's no punishment for a wrong answer, so don't omit any questions. And another kind of tip for standardized testing that I was taught when I took them was if you have no idea, guess B or C. For whatever reason, statistically speaking, they tend to be more common answers. So if you have to just pull an answer out of your hat, try B or C. So with that, that's what I wanted to say about the TOEFL. Again, feel free to use your question box if you have any questions that you would like me to answer. I'm going to pause here for about 1 minute because we are already getting close to the end of the webinar, and see if anybody has anything they want to ask about the TOEFL before we start into the SAT 2. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, but feel free to ask at the end if you do. The SAT 2, so you've already taken the SAT. Maybe you've taken it twice. What do they mean, the SAT 2? Is it a bad movie sequel? No. The SAT 2s used to be called achievement tests, and they are tests in very specific subjects. This might be a little bit closer to what you might be used to in terms of exams. It's a exam in history or math, biology or chemistry, and lots of foreign languages. Unfortunately, Russian is not among them, but Chinese, Spanish, Latin, etc. And they're scored the same way as the SAT. As we've done previously, we're going to just jump right in with a poll and see what you guys think. We're going to give you a little test of biology, and I will tell you, I had to look the answer to this one up. I had no idea what it was. The nitrogenous base that occurs in RNA but not in DNA is deoxyribose, ribose, uracil, cytosine, or thymine. Go ahead and give it a guess. I think this is something you either know or you don't. And I hope that you see by this question how it's very different from the type of reading question or math question, which is sort of a more general question that we've seen. This is something where typically you either know it or you don't. And that's how all the SAT 2 questions are. They're highly specific to the subject matter covered. I'm going to close this poll and share the results. We had answers all over the place, and the correct answer is actually uracil, which for some reason no one guessed. I didn't know the answer either. But let's go ahead and move on to the next question and see how you do in world history. Differences between which 2 religions contributed to violent conflict in India during and after the struggle for independence in 1947. So go ahead and give it a vote. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but what religions were in conflict as India received its independence in 1947? All right, I'm going to give a couple more seconds. We have a few people who haven't voted yet. And I'm going to go ahead and close it and show you the results. So the correct answer was C, Hinduism and Islam. And that's why we have the state of Pakistan. But again, I just wanted to show you that these are exams that you can prepare for. You can find out what material is covered, and you can study it. So this is a very different way of preparation insofar as for the SAT 1, you really want to work on your general math knowledge, your general English reading comprehension. Whereas for these, there's a specific body of material that you want to study and know. And you register for the SAT 2 at the same place that you register for the SAT. The exam is only an hour long, each exam, and on any given day, you can take as many as 3 of them. It costs $54 to take one exam and then $12 for every additional exam. If you're taking a language exam, I think there's an additional charge for that. You take them in the same places that you would take the SAT. And when to take this exam? I guess I neglected to mention the point of the SAT too is it's another exam that highly selective universities require. They usually want to see your scores in 3 tests, and just like the SAT, these exams are scored from 200 to 800, and if you're looking at an elite university, you're really talking about you want to show scores in the 700 range. You're trying to show mastery of specific subjects, your outstanding knowledge of French, or your great physics knowledge. And when should you take this? Because these are very specific, subject-specific exams, you can take them after you cover the subject. So American students, for example, would typically take biology their freshman year. So they might take the freshman year being 9th grade in the United States. They might take the biology exam after 9th grade. You can take these exams early and get them out of the way if you're still early in your high school career. You want to take them and be done with them. And you can take many of them. Some people take as many as 10. Again, I don't see a reason for that as long as your scores are okay. You might want to take them at the end of your 9th or 10th grade year once you've covered the material. I would say plan again maybe to take, you can also take and retake these exams if you need to, or you can take different ones. Usually universities are concerned with your 3 best scores again. In the case of a place like MIT or Caltech, if you're looking for a really technical university or you're planning to enroll in a very specific department, they might care to see your biology scores or your math scores. But for the most part, it doesn't matter which ones you take. You just want to take the ones that you're best with. So I'm going to go ahead and not pause for questions here since we're running out of time and leave the question time for the end and talk briefly about AP exams, which are advanced placement exams, and IB exams, which are the International Baccalaureate exams. And if you're in an international baccalaureate program, you know it, and you know what the IB exams are. Similarly for the advanced placement exams. The primary reason people take these exams is because they get credit for college. High schools will say, our students are doing college level work while they're in high school. And so if you get credit for an AP exam in English, you might be able to skip your freshman year of English in college. And in fact, if you did enough advanced placement classes and you got good enough scores on your exams, you might not even need to have a freshman year in college. You would get enough credit. If, let's say, you got credit for an AP math exam, an AP English exam, AP biology, and AP French, it might be treated as if you would start college as a sophomore. So that has 2 big advantages. First of all, you could save your parents a lot of money because you might be in college for only 3 years. Some people do that. I knew someone in college who did that. But what a lot of people do is they use it in order to take more advanced classes or to do 2 majors. So your major is like fakultet, like, you know, what I'm going to be a Russian history major, but if I took enough AP tests or I did enough IB exams to get college credit for them, maybe I also have enough time to do biology as a major. That's one of the big advantages of taking these exams. And also, if you're looking to enroll again in very prestigious universities, a lot of American students start taking AP classes in 10th or 11th grade, and they take lots of exams. And if they score well on them, they show the university that, hey, I'm prepared to come to your university. I'm taking the hardest classes that my school offers, and I'm getting good scores on the exams. Every university treats the scoring for AP exams and IB exams a little bit differently. This is just an example from my wonderful hometown of Cincinnati. At our university, you can see there are AP exams in history, biology, calculus, chemistry, Chinese, pretty much any university class that you can think of. This is how they treat it. If you get a 4 or a 5, it's as if you took a year of art history. If you get a 4 or a 5 on the art history exam. And similarly, with the IB exam, if you're in an international baccalaureate school, typically if you get a score of 5 or higher, If you get that on, say, the French exam, it's as if you took a year of college in French. So they give you the credit, and you don't need to take that class in college. I know I went through that very, very quickly, but usually if you're taking an AP class at your high school or an IB class at your high school, the school will help you coordinate taking the exam. It also costs money to take these exams, and you usually would take them in May of the year that you took the class. As I said, you might take it in your last year of high school or the year before, but your high school can help guide you through that process. So I won't spend a lot of time on that for people who might not have that available. I will say it's also possible sometimes to take AP classes online. So if your school doesn't offer this, you can do some searching and find a university that offers AP classes that you could take. If you really want to demonstrate, if you say you really love biology and you'd like to see what an AP biology class looks like, you can search around for that and show some initiative. So we've come to the end, and I appreciate everyone hanging with me throughout this hour. And I just want to compare the exams, their purpose a little bit, and their scoring to sum up what we've talked about. The SAT is a general knowledge exam in contrast to the SAT-2 and the AP exams, IB exams, which are very specific. They cover very specific subject matter. So in the case of your SATs and your IBs, you want to know the subject matter that's on the exam, and you want to prepare very specifically for it. In the case of the SAT and to a lesser degree the TOEFL, you prepare for that more by being a good student, by reading a lot, watching movies, listening to things in English. This has a more general preparation to it. I also neglected to mention as we were discussing it, but there are companies that run preparation courses. So I know for the SAT, Kaplan's very, very well known. The Princeton Review is very well known. For the TOEFL, Nancy, you suggested there's the Macmillan practice exams. I would suggest if you have enough time and you're not concerned about spending the money, take the exams once and see what kind of scores you get, and then figure out what sort of university you want to go to and see if your scores are good enough. And then if they're not good enough, figure out how you need to prepare. If you have enough self-discipline, you can prepare on your own, as I said, by getting the practice exams and just working through them, reading the answers and figuring out why you didn't do them correctly. If you need a little help, well, then you need to start looking at companies like Kaplan or Princeton Review and, you know, taking online preparation if you want to do it from home if you're in a place where they don't offer that. But if possible, take the SAT the first time in the spring of your junior year. That would be 10th grade if you're in the Russian system, and then take it again the fall of your senior year. And then with the SAT-2 and the TOEFL, work those around your plans for the SAT because they're offered more frequently, or frankly, they're less important than the SAT. So work those exams in at your convenience based on when you need to take the SAT. Take the SAT and then repeat the SAT. With that said, that was everything that I wanted to cover. And I, again, would like to thank you very much for your attention. And I'm going to just take the opportunity again to let you ask me any questions. I also wanted to say, feel free to email me. I think everyone has my email based on your registration. You can also visit our website, www.puntusa.ru. And there's all kinds of useful information on our website about enrollment in U.S. universities. What does it look like? What's the process like? I've already got a question about what is our next webinar and how do you register. We're going to do our next webinar December 2nd, and we're going to talk about the personal essay or the personal statement, and then also what some people call an activity resume or a brag sheet. This really gets to the point of extracurricular activities, which is not as important for enrollment in Russian universities, but which plays a very big role in enrollment in a U.S. university. And that's going to be at this same time. We'll do it the same way, English and then Russian, on December 2nd. I will be, okay, I'll be sending out another email with registration links for this. So if you participate in this webinar, I'll send you the email to register. И опять я хочу просто все повторить, потому что этот вопрос был задан, как я поняла, на русском языке. Повторяю, что у нас следующий вебинар будет 2 декабря, и я всем просто по имейлу пошлю ссылку, чтобы зарегистрироваться на это. Тема вебинара будет личное сочинение и резюме вне классной деятельности. Зачем это надо и как это лучше сделать, поскольку это играет очень большую роль для поступления в американские университеты, но это не так интересно и нужно, чтобы поступить в России. I don't know. Again, I'll just close by leaving you my contact information. Feel free at any time to send me email. You can also email me if you don't get that registration for our next webinar. As I said, the purpose of our company is to help clarify the U.S. admissions process because it is very different from the Russian admissions process, and we can give people a lot of help as they go through what can be a very confusing and difficult process. With that said, the webinar is finished. I hope you found it useful. I also welcome any feedback you want to give. If you want to send me an email and tell me what you thought was not done well, if you have any additional questions, material that you think we should have covered, or if you thought that there was something that was particularly useful. I appreciate any kind of comments that you could have because we want to make this as useful as possible to the people who attend. So Nancy, thank you very much for your help. And to all the attendees, I appreciate your participation. If you should have in your email, if you'd like to, if for some reason I wasn't clear and you want to attend the webinar that we're going to do in Russian, it'll be starting at, let's see, in an hour and a half. We're going to repeat this in Russian. So you can register for the Russian webinar if you think it might be helpful to hear this all again in Russian, or if you just want to see how broken my Russian can be sometimes as I try and present this material in Russian. You're welcome to join us for the Russian webinar as well. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you and goodbye, and feel free to contact me if you have any more questions.